I'm seeing more and more founders being front and center in their company. So like removing all the marketing crap, all the slogans and the colors and stuff like that, and just being out there on social themselves. There were a few founders. I really like how Gong, the API gateway company, always had their founders front and center talking about distributed systems and stuff like that. But for a lot of the Silicon Valley, it was, I will let marketing do the outreach. And I think there's a change now. You see it even in Facebook and in other places where you see the founders actually being out there and speaking about product, speaking about vision. And I think that's a refreshing thing. I think it's slightly connected to the beginning of our conversation around demos and raw demos. I want to see raw truth from founders that are actually talking about the change that they're trying to make.
Yeah, it's amazing to see Mark Zuckerberg's transition around all
Yeah.
this, right? I think he's the most dramatic turnaround. He's obviously had some really good training, but
Yes.
it's definitely a change of approach. Like he's changed his look, sure, but he's also changed how he behaves. You know, he appeared on at least one unscripted podcast where he was just allowed himself to be interviewed. Sam Altman was also on All In last week. So this idea of the founder, yeah, having an unfiltered voice. So it's not just up on stage again, a highly produced keynote. It's just, hey, I'm going to get out there. I'm going to say what I like, how I like to say it. And that is more compelling. And, you know, I think there are a few founders whose brand has improved so fast, so quickly as Mark Zuckerberg in the last year. He's gone from being like this kind of evil geek to being something quite different from that.
I think that's a very, very positive influence on the market because up until a few years ago, like you would see founders say the official party line vetted by every PR person and every legal person, rendering it so vanilla that it doesn't mean anything. And now
Mm.
you see founders being actually themselves very raw, very truthful, and sometimes very cringy and making mistakes. But I really like that. Again, coming to the beginning of our conversation, doing demo live and having it break, that's part of life. Making a mistake and saying the wrong thing, that's part of life. And I think that's a much better way to be out of our comfort zone and into the risk. That's the way you actually innovate as a society.
It's interesting because it does sort of raise the question of what happens when the founder is no longer in charge. I think, for example, Tim Cook hasn't been able to follow that playbook. It very much ties a company to its founder, which I think is completely appropriate when you're a startup, a scale up, and so on. But when you're $1 trillion company, I don't know.
So find another person. Like I think Apple did it a little bit with like some of their advocates. Find a person who's willing to
Yeah.
show the vision. If you don't show people the vision in a raw way, they just don't have a vision for your company, for your what you're building. And I think that's what I'm trying to say. I'm saying like founders need to be front and center, and if they can't or it's the company has grown, find someone else who's front and center.
Yeah, yeah, I'm being the devil's advocate here. I
Yeah.
really,
That's
yeah,
fine.
quite strongly, I agree with you. I think it's really positive. It's nice to see, and it makes you wonder about how you market effectively. Because yeah, what you don't want to do is polish everything down so that there's no sharp edges. It's just a sort of a big ball of nothing. And it's nearly like, you know, going back to our previous point around layoffs and productivity in smaller companies, where it's like, I think marketing is a key function, and shout out to all our marketing friends out there. But also, in many big companies, there are bloated bureaucratic marketing organizations whose job is to manage risk and be bland, who in many cases are probably contributing negative value
Yep.
to the brand, to their ability to market. And so you could certainly imagine marketing departments becoming, you know, leaner and sharper and more focused on how do we amplify the voice of the leader rather than putting out these messages that don't mean much to anybody and you know, are designed more not to offend than to inspire.
And I think that's another, if we look at it in a holistic way, we talked about firing because times are hard. You become more truthful when times are hard. You
Mm,
become more
mm,
down to earth when times are hard. So I think all
mm.
of these are signals of like, hey, we need to get down to earth and be truthful and show what we have and inspire instead of protecting what we have because we have a lot and we have abundance. So let's just cover our behinds. So I think that's the positive spin on like being pressured by the market and having more competition.
Look, I like all of this. Like I've said it before, I call myself a reluctant capitalist. I think I was a socialist when I was younger, and, I see a lot of the downsides of capitalism, but I also see that as a method for overall, like, lifting up humanity, it's unrivaled. Right. And so when they say, oh, okay, like if we can liberate people from doing bullshit work and do more interesting work and be more productive and add more meaning and more value, then that's awesome. Right. And
Yeah.
the market eventually corrects in that direction. So I really like to see that.